Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Lincolnshire Waste Partnership. And can I just advise members of the partnership, both present and on Teams, that we are live streaming the meeting. I was going to welcome Councillor Evans, but I'd like to welcome Councillor Deborah Evans, who's the new member for the Boston Borough Council, and Councillor Adam Stokes, who is also the new member for South Kesteven District Council. Those members and officers present in the council chamber, can I ensure that they switch the microphones on when speaking, and those viewing remotely will not be able to hear. Item 1 is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillor Gamber-James from South Holland District Council.
Thank you, Rachel. And is there any declaration of interest? No, say none. Minutes of the meeting of the Lincolnshire Waste Partnership. Is everyone happy with them? Technology's doing me. Can I just ask all those members who are voting members to switch on the screens and just raise their hands? Yep, that's fine. They're approved. And the next one, item 4, is partner updates. These have been circulated prior to the meeting. Has anyone got any comments on them or anything to add to them? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chairman. Obviously, there's some interesting updates there, and it's a changing situation everywhere. But whilst we talk quite a lot about how we're dealing with things as local authorities, and of course we generally, between most of us, manage our own workforce issues, and we're trying to react to a market. Can I just ask if Steve's on the call with regards to the Lincoln City report? It's showing what potentially could be some market failure now in the private sector with the issues that are being raised about capacity, and I just wondered whether there was any more updates on that and whether he foresees it as a problem going forward, because whilst they've got the contract and they were looking for contract renewal, are they envisaging issues renewing that contract going forward with the demands that are going to be placed upon us increasing by government?
Steve, are you on the call? I can't see him. Steve, are you there?
Chair, it's Bob Bushell here. Steve has been in contact with me. He is on, but his Teams is unstable at the moment, so he may be temporarily off, but he will be joining us, I'm sure.
Hello, councillors. Can anybody hear me now, please?
Yep, we can hear you.
Thank you, Bob. You're absolutely right. My connection does seem to be somewhat troublesome, but in direct response to the question that was asked, I think there are some difficulties in the private sector which are directly correlated with those seen in the public sector. They too are struggling for drivers, and of course, being tied into contracts, it means that they often can't respond in the way that local government can in terms of pay rises and things, because they've got fixed levels of income. So in straight answer to the question, yes, I think they have got some difficulties, and I would expect that there will be some increases in the cost of private contracts in the future.
Yep, thank you. Seeing no one else who wanted to speak on that item, we'll go on to item 5, which is the Waste Partnership Annual Report. Matthew, did you want to take this?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm hoping you can see and hear me. Just to go over the item, and I will go back a little bit for those, especially for those new members who won't have been aware of the annual report last year. I've got some notes actually that I shall share on the screen. If you could just confirm, Chair, that you can see these when they come up on the screen.
Yeah, we can see them.
Can you see that? Excellent, good. So in terms of the annual report is produced clearly annually for the partnership, and it measures our progress in terms of the strategic objectives which we set out in our waste strategy for Lincolnshire. That waste strategy the partnership adopted in January 2019. The first annual report, which was produced last summer, covered the year up to March 2020. This new annual report covers the year from April 2020 to March 2021. So if any members reading it do find it seems a little out of date, that's because it does cover specifically that year up to March 2021. In terms of the preparation of the report, sorry, while I think of it, I was going to say, Chairman, that I can't see hands or anything, so I'll leave it in your hands to deal with anyone raising their hands or any questions, but hopefully leave them to the end of what I'm saying. So in terms of preparation of this annual report, it's actually been completed for a little while now. We shared a draft version of the report with partners in July. In August, partners and the current portfolio holders at that time approved the final version of that annual report, and it was indeed then published at the beginning of September on the LWP webpage. So it is there, it has been publicly available. The purpose of bringing it to this meeting is that this is the next formal meeting after that process, so it's the next opportunity to actually formally present it to yourselves as a partnership. In terms of the headlines from the report, clearly COVID was the big thing that was going on last year. In terms of managing the COVID impact, we refer to that in the report and include thanks both to staff and to public for playing their part in helping to keep services running. The report also talked about improving services that despite those disruptions due to COVID, we still managed to proceed with rolling out twin stream collections and with moving other service developments forwards. Tackling waste crime, the Lincolnshire Environmental Crime Partnership has started doing good work, working together to look to reduce waste crime. There's been increasing engagement, for instance, the Residents Recycling Communications Panel, looking at how we talk to the public about recycling and about their waste. And also, we've not taken our eye off the ball of looking to the future. During last year, we were looking at national policies that were emerging, and we responded to government consultations, and we've started to look at things like food waste collections, which are coming over the horizon. So we've not taken our eye off that longer term ball as well. As well as the public version of the annual report, which has been published on the website, there are also some appendices which are included in the minutes that have been circulated, which show a bit more detail. They're really for internal use to give a bit more detail to members in terms of what's behind those headlines. Those appendices include a review of the waste strategy, vision and objectives, which found that all of those, although we set them in 2019, remain relevant, remain things we want to work towards. The appendices include an update on the action plan, looking at specific work streams and what has actually been happening. And it also gives a measuring performance section, which actually is probably the main part that is now slightly out of date because it was performance up to the end of March 2021. And I will be giving in the next item an update on our current performance. So that's where that next slide goes. But I shall at the moment return it back to you, Chairman, in case there are any questions on that presentation on the annual report.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thank you, Matthew.
Has anyone got any questions? Councillor Head.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Maybe a bit too late if the document's already been published, but I noticed that the recycling rates quoted in the little graphic on page 27 seem to be out of sync with the figures on page 36. It says on the graphic, it says recycling only 20% recycling rate.
I shall have a look. So that was page
Page 27. You've got the four little graphics, which, by the way, I like the graphics, but I'm just querying the figure of the recycling rate of 20%. It seemed to be out of sync with what's actually happening further down there.
I would say that is, I'll need to double check, but it depends on how you're defining recycling, because our headline recycling rate includes composting as well as dry recycling. So that would be because the composting is shown as a separate figure on that graphic. So actually the recycling rate that we report as our headline recycling rate is both of those added together, plus actually for various technical reasons a little bit more as well. But yes, it's one of the bugbears of my life as a waste statistician, that when you talk about our recycling rate, there are about 50 answers I could give you, which are all valid in their own way, but that's because it doesn't include the composting in that 20% one.
Right, well, I've got another one for you on that count then. I think it's page 39, page 38, carbon footprint. We have a carbon footprint which relates to landfill. Does that figure include the carbon footprint from the energy from waste plant? Because obviously there's some materials from the energy from waste plant that has to go to landfill that's not reusable. So I just wondered how that figure was actually calculated, because it's quite high.
I believe it does include that, but the material that comes out of the energy from waste and has to go to landfill is inert material, which by nature, because any biodegradable material has been burnt off, it doesn't biodegrade, and therefore it doesn't produce the methane and other landfill gases that are the big problem of landfill. So I believe it does include it, but it would only be tiny compared to the carbon footprint of biodegradable waste going to landfill, which is the real problem.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. We've got Councillor Evans next.
Hello, thank you for that information. My sort of issue really with the report is, from what I see sort of on the ground with the residents, is the twin cycling isn't necessarily the all singing, all dancing thing that we believe it is. There's a lot of things that we're still working at trying to get around. And so one of the things is, I think we all sort of need to work together and share and acknowledge that there's areas where we've left all that contamination in bins on the street, so it's not being counted. So then that leads on to, you have to have a bin amnesty, you have to take the bins away. So there has been lots of areas that have been really tricky and really sort of quite awkward, and are still ongoing. So I'm still trying to look at ways we can deal with, we can't use our paths in some areas of town because there's a sheer volume of bins. So I'm having to look at possible underground bins. So we need to share all this information with each other. Otherwise, everybody's going to follow us, and then they're going to go through the same, the same pluses where we've got some good rates of recycling, but also some. I don't want everybody to go through the same process. I want it to be to learn from where we're sort of getting problems, and things like just bits of contamination in town centres where people from takeaways just pop one thing in and then it's not taken. So I think we've got to really embrace the things that don't work, and then we can get the public on side more. Contractors, the contractors to me, I feel that the contractors to a certain degree have the upper hand, because for example, we have lots of side cardboard waste, really clean waste, but it's not allowed to be taken. If the lid's up at a certain height, it's not allowed to be taken, just in case there's a contamination. And we've said to the contractors, please come up with a solution, and they haven't come up with a solution. We're happy to have it in some kind of recycled bin bags at the side, but they're not coming up with solutions. So we need to get them to work more with us and to come up with more solutions. We need, I think, across the board, you said about the compost, we've got rubble in our compost at Skegness and at Boston, and Louth haven't. So we need to be working at, we're all working together in the same way. We're taking our soil and rubble all the way to Skegness from Boston, 3-hour journey there and back. So it's not climate friendly. So I think personally, and that the Waste Partnership is doing a fantastic job, but I would like to get more involved in the things that really aren't working, so that we can really do a fantastic job. And that's it at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Can I just ask what you mean by the the contractors not collecting the side waste on the paper and card?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. If you can't fit all the cardboard in the bins, which a lot of people can't because of it's picked up every so many weeks, the people have been popping it at the side of the bin, and the contractors refuse to take any cardboard that has not been in the bin itself. And we suggested recycled bin liners, and they've refused this. So we've put it to them for them to come up with a solution. And there's lots of good quality cardboard that is not going because they refuse to take this. So it can only go if it's been in a bin with a lid down. And yeah, so this is a solution. We need to sort of try and get the contractors to realise, actually, we are seriously saying we want you to take this cardboard. Otherwise, we'll have to look at other contractors. And because there's so few contractors available in glass and everything else, we're not actually getting the best deals I feel that we would get if there was more variety for us. That's it, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not sure what Councillor Evans means by contractors. I thought we were talking about domestic waste, and obviously that's in-house. But with regards to the cardboard, then our experience in North Stephen is not the same. You know, this is about getting the message out to everybody. We've had the same periods now. We've had 2 collections, and we've proven on the second collection. Yet there was a lot of material on the first one, but it was still in the bins. And that if you get the message out to people that they can break it down, not tear it to shreds, but at least break it down into sizable pieces, then the bins are more than adequate. Because if there's any more than that, as we've discovered, quite often these are small cottage businesses. These are people who've got home businesses. And I've had these conversations where they're saying, why aren't you taking it? And I'm saying, well, you're a business. Why aren't you employing business waste contractors to take your business waste away? Because obviously the domestic bins are not set up to accommodate businesses, and some people are getting masses of stuff shipped into there, which is great that they've got a business that's seen them, going forward through COVID and whatever reason, but that can't then be reflected on the local authority isn't able to take the waste away. And I totally understand why, if waste is outside of the bins, it can't be taken, because the whole point of this system is that it is clean, suitable, recyclable material, and the only way we can guarantee that is by it being in the right bin. Which is the message that we're getting across everywhere, whether it's individual authorities or the partnership. Right thing, right bin, and it's got to be that. We can't divert from that. And that's why I'm not here to criticise any authority, but we're certainly not talking about any kind of amnesties or even, to a certain degree, understanding. The messages have gone out. The literature and the leaflets that have gone to residents is perfectly clear. We've now just seen this in North Kesteven with the second recyclable, the MDR round, that we've halved what was the first round's contamination in one go. It will come down again, and then I will call them hard to reach at this point. The hard to reach people, they will be reached in a way that sees that we won't have this problem of bins being left because the wrong things are in them. And it's got to be about education, but as an authority, we've got to make sure, as authorities, we've got to make sure that both individually and collectively we keep to the same message, and it's got to be a very clear, firm message that this is the way forward. There's no way back. To my mind, it's just a matter of that. It's just providing the clarity. We can ask the questions in meetings, but we should not be sort of keeping these questions going on the street, because we don't want people out there to try and keep a conversation going that it's unclear. We're being very clear about what we need to do, and we need to stick to that. And if we stick to it, it's very easy from my point of view. But one thing I did hear then was bins coming out of the street. Yes, if we had commercial bins like they have in Spain that come up over night time out the pavements, it's fantastic. But whether British streets are adaptable for that, I don't know.
Thank you, Councillor Wright.
Can I come back on that? Is that okay? Yeah, I'd just like to say, if only it was that simple. And good luck with how long it will take you to achieve that, because we're sort of ahead of where you are. So I think you really need to have a conversation with Boston, really. And also, a contractor does have our bin men pick up the cardboard, but a contractor is the one that takes it away for recycling. So that I am correct on that. And I just want to stop you having to go through all this. I mean, we're supposed to make it relatively easy for people to recycle. And there has been issues with the twin cycling that I don't think you're happy to accept are going to happen. We've done the education. I would like to actually, if anybody can find me, the cost of all these leaflets, all these educations, everything, because we've got to accept that every area is different, and Boston is definitely a different area. So we will have different issues. We've got transient workers, so we've got people that are only here for a couple of months. So literally getting the message across, we try and get the message across in many different languages. We've got people that work really well with this, but we've got people we're having to continue to educate. We can't just say this is clear. We've got to we've got to do this constantly, and it's just looking at maybe accepting that areas of this are not going to work, and be a little bit more. I've had an open meeting on this, and the residents don't feel as if they're listened to, and I think we need to just not say, right, what we say goes, that's it. We need to accept that there's really big challenges with this, and not make out that it's not as challenging as it is. And I think you will find that moving forward, because, as I say, we're already sort of slightly ahead, and the money you will be spending on education is quite high, rather than looking at other options, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Rachel, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify a couple of points in terms of the contractor. So as collected by the District Council's collection crews, taken to LCC, and then it's transported on to the contractors who take the paper and card from us, and we're contracted to palm paper for that. In terms of clarifying why we've not taken side waste, it's twofold. One is around meeting the agenda of the Joint Municipal Waste Management Strategy around waste minimisation, first and foremost. And secondly, that excess waste that sits at the side of a bin and is left out overnight, and I know Boston bins are presented before 5:30 in the morning as well. The amount of moisture that is attracted to that material will take us over the moisture limit that is acceptable as quality material to our contractors, which is why one of the primary reasons that we do not accept side waste at the side of the bins. And obviously that moisture, once there's a whole kind of technical explanation, but once it's bulked up and there's a potential for it to create fire, believe it or not. And so it's one of the main reasons. But again, we're very conscious around, we've sat in a number of these sessions where we've talked about waste minimisation, so reduce being the primary aim of what we do. So that was a decision taken by the partnership as we went through the trials and we did the test, is that we would not accept any side waste, so nothing that had been in a sealed material. In terms of, and I understand Councillor Evans' points around looking at alternative ways, the paper market do not want any plastic bags at all at this point in time within their waste streams, because obviously it compromises the quality of the materials. There are ongoing discussions with the market, because obviously the upcoming Environment Bill is looking at separated materials. So all of the paper mills and the manufacturers are very conscious about some of these harder to reach properties. You know, if we think about some of the bigger cities with the high-rise blocks, how do we help them? So we are constantly talking to our partners who provide receptacles for collection and with the paper mills around how they're developing that. And I've said to them, and have regular conversations that say, if you've got some alternatives for us to try, in Lincolnshire we will be happy to try some of those alternatives for you. But at this point in time, 98% of those properties that are serviced using a wheel bin, we're collecting the materials therein with them. And I think just in terms of the engagement, I completely agree in terms of education and engagement. It is key, critical, and it's not a one-size-fits-all. At the county, we actually fund the performance improvement team who are doing the lion's share of that engagement, that education, those householder communications, and are working then with the districts to transfer that knowledge and get that sustainably embedded within the districts, and we will continue to do that.
Thank you, Rachel. Not seeing anyone else, but I think there is definitely a learning curve from all the experiences to take forward to the next sort of district. But Nicole, did you want to come in?
Thank you. Yes, it was. I just wanted to thank the councillor really for being able to share with us that kind of real time experience, because it is a big scheme, and it was a risk for us to take this on as a collective to roll it out county-wide. So whilst I accept all areas are unique and will have their own issues and problems, that's equally not to suggest that will apply in each and every area. I wanted to just come back a little bit and pick up on what Rachel was saying about the engagement and education, because yes, it's a spend, but actually if you compare it to what the alternatives are, it's really good value for money. And the spend on education, awareness and engagement is, for me, really good value for money. So I would be really interested in hearing what those alternatives are that the councillor mentioned that we could look into. Because if we don't get the behavioural change from our residents, we will never make the impact that we need to on the reuse, recycling, reduce agenda. And the Environment Bill is bringing in, as Rachel's identified, a whole host of other streams and behaviours that are going to require our residents to fundamentally change what they do. So, you know, we have to deal with the end product from a disposal authority, and the districts have to be the ones that kind of collect that. Our waste figures can't continue to keep escalating. So the only way we're going to really make some inroads is if the beginning point, i.e. the consumer, changes their behaviour. And all of the evidence suggests that the best way to do that is through education and through engagement and through awareness. So I'm not saying it's the only way, but actually it's proving to be really cost effective. And I would be really interested to hear what alternatives we could also utilise that the councillors mentioned. Thanks.
Thank you, Nicole. So seeing no one else wants to speak on this item, can I ask all, it's just for noting this one, so can I just ask all the voting members to switch on the screens and just raise your hands in favour? Yep, that's fine, thank you. So that's noted. So the next one is item 6, which is performance measure update. Again, that's from Matthew.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I shall return to my slides. So there we are. And sorry, I'm just trying to get to, I've got 2 screens and I'm just trying to get to the point where you can see what you need to see and I can see what I need to see, which is okay. So in terms of performance measures, again, some of what I'm saying will repeat things that I've said at previous meetings for the benefit of those who are have recently joined the partnership. In terms of measuring how we're performing against our strategic objectives, the partnership have identified 4 themes, one of which is waste hierarchy, which is about prioritising waste minimisation and then recycling, about contamination levels in dry recyclables, our carbon footprint, and having customer-friendly services. So those 4 themes, we're at different stages in terms of developing performance measures for them. The one we've made the most progress on is the waste hierarchy. We've identified 2 key performance indicators and set targets for them, one of which is the recycling rate of waste from households, and the aim clearly is to have more recycling. And the second is the kilograms per household of household waste collected, and that's about measuring whether we're managing to minimise waste and certainly to keep it from growing, as has happened in the past when we had, certainly when I started working with the Waste Partnership, we were seeing growth of about 3% waste per year, and it's nothing like that now. We've managed to level that out. So just to let you know, in terms of the figures that I'll be showing, the charts that I'll be showing, the charts are in the report, but I'll put them up on the screen and speak about them. The figures for 2021-22 clearly are not complete figures yet for 2021-22, but they're based on data we have so far, the first 6 months of the year, April to September, and then have estimates beyond that of what we think might happen. But please note that the final results may vary considerably from those depending on what does happen. And that's even more so this year than in other years, because we still don't know whether what we're seeing at the moment in terms of performance is a new normal and is how things are going to be for the moment, or whether things will return to pre-COVID, because things at the moment are considerably different to how they were 2 years ago pre-COVID. So in terms of the charts, this is the kind of main headline chart for waste hierarchy showing our overall performance. We have the gold line shows our recycling rate, and the good news in the early days of our new waste strategy was we were managing to move it in the right direction. Unfortunately, last year and going on into this year, we've seen quite a major impact from changes to the quantity of waste that we're processing due to COVID. The last year, the household waste sites were closed for a while, early in the first lockdown, and then had considerable restrictions on who could access the site and when, in order to make sure they were a COVID safe environment. Although that had led to a considerably lower tonnage throughput through our household waste sites, although that then those restrictions have been eased, and for instance the booking system was removed a couple of months ago now, we've not actually seen a major upturn in the quantity of waste going through the sites. The household waste sites are now running at about 60% of the tonnage throughput that we saw in pre-COVID days in equivalent months. It's not clear, as I say, whether that's a new normal or whether that's something that we will see change as things maybe do return to a more kind of pre-COVID normal level of usage. But we have to see what happens with that. That does unfortunately mean, you'll notice that I'll explain the link between that and our recycling rate. The household waste sites, being somewhere where people come to recycle their waste, have a recycling rate of around 70–75% of the material that passes through them. Curbside recycling rates are in the kind of 30–40% of the total material that's presented at curbside. So as we see less material going through household waste sites, that although the recycling rate is still in the 70s, that 70% recycling makes a lower contribution to the overall average than it did previously. And having previously bumped up the recycling rate in the last non-COVID year to 45%, there's less of that boost because less is going through the household waste sites, and therefore our recycling rate is lower. What will actually happen at the end of the year is still a bit unclear, but it does look like we'll be maybe 41–42% again this year, and not seeing anything like the increase to the targets we originally set pre-COVID, which was to aim to work towards 50% recycling. That's the bad news in terms of the impact of COVID on our statistics. The good news is in terms of waste minimisation. We have seen that reduction, as I say, in quantity going through household waste sites. At the same time, curbside collections quantity has increased, but by a smaller overall tonnage than the decrease at household waste sites. And the same applies to other collections, other waste that's included in the totals that we as a waste partnership handle. So actually, looking at previous years, the pink bars are showing the kilograms per household of waste, and the key is over to the right here for that. We are seeing less. I would point out it's not a zero at the bottom of the graph, so we've not halved the quantity, but we did see a decrease in kilograms per household of waste. It has looking like it's gone back up again a bit this year. As I say, throughput at household waste sites has gone up now to around 60%, having been about 50% last year. But the good news is we are on target to be round about the 1,000 kilograms per household that we've targeted, compared to some of the historical years when we were over 50 kilograms per household, more than that in terms of total waste. So that's the headlines of how things are going. Just some detail in terms of the other charts. This one is dry recycling from curbside. You can see the gold line to maintain the theme is where the recycling rate is, and this is the contribution that curbside recycling makes to our overall recycling rate, to that 42% that I was just showing. And that curbside recycling, although it looks like it's making a slightly smaller contribution this year, actually in terms of kilograms per household, you can see the two bars, it's almost identical. So green is targeted recyclables, what we tell people we want to recycle. The gold little bar is other material that we've managed to recycle that people have put in their recycling bins. The red is non-recyclables, the contamination. And all of those sections are about the same as last year. So it looks like the recycling contribution will be around about 15%, which is good. It's better than it was in pre-COVID times. We are improving things. We are improving our recycling rate from curbside. The next one is composting. This is all composting. It's green waste from curbside, but also from household waste sites. The general trend in terms of the contribution to the recycling rate is down. But you can see that the quantity, the kilograms per household, which is the green bars, do go up and down a little bit. It's more than anything else is affected by weather and growing conditions for the year. But it does look like we are receiving less green waste for composting generally as time goes on. The government plans to change how green waste collections are funded, may have an impact on that as collections become free of charge, well, that's the proposal, for collections to become free of charge to the public rather than a service that can be charged for. It may be that we receive more green waste and that goes up, but at the moment the trend is generally down, but it does make a significant contribution towards our overall recycling rate. This one is a bit more complicated, but it does give some useful information. It shows a breakdown of the kilograms per household, so how much total waste we're handling from each household and where it comes from and where it goes. The little red bar down the bottom shows how little we landfill compared to everything else. The gold bar is what we send to energy from waste. That is up a little bit this year compared to last year. Curbside dry recycling is about the same, the purple bar. Other recycling and reuse, this is largely recycling from household waste sites. That's about the same as last year, but unfortunately is still, as I say, lower than in previous years because we're seeing lower throughput at household waste sites. And composting is a bit up on last year, but as I say, the general trend has been down. But the good news is that 1,003 kilograms per household that we're forecasting is almost spot on the target that we wanted to keep waste down to 1,000 kilograms per household, having been higher than that in previous years. So that's the data in terms of the waste hierarchy. In terms of contamination, the second theme, the current forecast in terms of the data, and there is a chart that I put in the report, but given what I'm about to say about it, I'm not going to show it on the screen. The current forecast for 2021-22 shows similar levels, both in terms of percentage and kilograms per household of contamination to last year, but we need to amend how we're calculating it. The calculation is currently done based on just mixed recyclables, but as has been pointed out by officers from districts, those districts where there are twin stream collections, the paper and card, which is much cleaner and has almost no recycling, almost no contamination, sorry, in it. I think it's 1 or 2%. That clean material coming out of the mixed recyclables needs to be counted as part of the overall recyclable, dry recyclables that are being collected from curbside. So what I'm going to look to do is to amend the calculation, and rather than just look at MDR, mixed dry recyclables, to look at overall how much in terms of dry recycling was collected at curbside and how much of that total was contamination. So I should be looking to do that and present what I believe is a more realistic and accurate figure that shows the change and the improvements in overall performance arising from twin stream. And from the associated work, because I know Rachel and the team have been looking at working with the public to reduce levels of contamination in their mixed recyclables, as well as getting us clean paper and card. The second thing is that, again, LCC colleagues are working with our MRF in terms of looking at sampling procedures and looking at whether the sampling that has happened in the past was giving as true a picture as possible of what the contamination level was in our recycling and is in our recycling. I think it's a case of, as we've built expertise at LCC by having our own sampling station, doing our own sampling, we've moved to the point where we are now able to look at things with an expert eye and give advice and have discussions. So the hope is, and I believe the initial figures are starting to show, that contamination levels measured and reported from the MRF are looking a little lower than they were previously. That is partly the impact of twin stream collections and the associated work with the public, but also it does look like even in areas where there hasn't been a major service change, we are going to see lower contamination levels going forwards. So that's why I've not put the chart on the screen at the moment, because things are in transition. Chairman, do you want me to take this question from Councillor Evans at the moment?
Yeah, just a second as they come in.
Okay, is that okay? Thank you. I mean, these figures are looking as if they're going in the right direction. And the thing for me is, I think one of our biggest collections, unfortunately, in Boston is fly tipping. We literally collect fly tipping every day from 7 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night. So we need to sort of look at, and that's going off to the HWRC. And I would like to ask the question, is that measured separately? Because obviously everything we do has a knock-on effect. So this increase in fly tipping and is because of many, many reasons. But one of the reasons is people say the bins aren't big enough, they can't get rid of the rubbish. And also the effect on the tip closing in the afternoon, the tip being closed 2 days a week. This is one of the biggest complaints myself and the councillors across the board have, that people cannot get rid of the waste. And the knock-on effect of that is not only do we have fly tipping throughout the whole of the borough, we have a lot of fly tipping near the tip. I just wondered if there's any way we can sort of look at how we can monitor that information so we can see better. I did a free bulky waste pickup for the month of September, and it was so popular that it's right till the end of November, and some days we had 90 calls for people asking for things to be taken away. So to me, it proves that when we offer a way for people to get rid of waste sensibly and in a thoughtful way, they will take that option. Not everybody, but we also have to have we've got an enforcement team, which it costs a lot of money, and we need enforcement, but we seem to have to be doing more and more enforcement. And it would be great if we could sort of look at it, as much as we're looking into our recyclable bits, if we can look into how much of this fly tipping is coming through the HWRC, and if we can, sorry, it's repeating back, and if we can actually look at how we can make those more people friendly, so that that's not our biggest one of our biggest complaints. And I think that we would then hopefully we would see a reduction in, we would see more recycling and a reduction in what we're having to go and pick up every day. But I just wondered if we monitor what comes in at fly tipping is what's of interest to me, please.
Did you want to just take that, Nicole?
I'll take part of it if that's okay, and then I'm going to ask Mike to step in with regards to the HWRCs, because I would actually be quite interested to see the statistics from Boston Borough with regards to the tonnage for fly tipping, if they're collecting waste from 7 in the morning till 7 in the evening. Now, obviously, that's a phenomenal responsibility and amount. What I just wanted to do was just have a conversation about potentially disconnecting fly tipping from HWRCs, because whilst I understand that that's in the psyche, what I think it's really hard to evidence is that there's an established correlation there. So essentially what we would be suggesting is that the average resident who would pack up their car thoughtfully with all of the things that they want to take to a recycling centre, and simply because that recycling centre is not open to them at that particular moment in time, or during when we had the booking system, they couldn't get a booking system, that would manifest itself in all of those residents then simply dumping their waste. I think that's a really difficult and hard judgment to say that our residents would do that. I think there's a particular type of person who behaves kind of recklessly, but regardless if the HWRCs were open 24 hours a day, they'd still do that. I don't think what we can say that the average individual who would use an HWRC simply because that it wasn't available to them at that particular time would then the alternative dump their waste
Please, could
down
I come back
farm track.
on that?
If you could just let me finish, and then that'd be really helpful. Thank you. So I think that's kind of quite a bit of a judgment of which we haven't got a correlation. And I appreciate, you know, that I'm talking from an officer and not a political perspective. So I think that it would be really interesting. My understanding is that actually the most of the fly tipping data is collected by the district areas, and I'll look to my district colleagues to tell me otherwise. They're all nodding that actually that is a district function, and I would be really interested to hear what other districts are reporting with regards to their data and their waste. But I think it would also be really helpful to hear from Mike, who's the head of service for waste, just because we have endless conversations about our HWRCs and their opening hours, as you can imagine, and I think he will have some really pertinent points to make. Thanks.
Right, thank you. Oh, it's not coming back. Right, okay.
Can I just let Mike come in before I come back to you, Deborah?
Thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yep, sorry.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes, just to add what Nicole's just said, I think the two things regarding the first thing regarding the fly tip material. We've recently been having discussions on monitoring, on capturing the data on fly tipping. We've had questions asked of ourselves as to how much we are disposing of. That's something that is impossible for us to answer because we don't collect the material. The district councils do, and if that material is not being weighed and measured every time there's a collection, then by the district councils, then that is something that we can't actually report on. So it's very difficult because they are going to different avenues. They may be going to the transfer stations, they may be going to the HWRCs. Unless every piece of material is measured when it's deposited at a site, then we can't actually collect that data. It's not our responsibility, but it will be really useful. Granted, if we did have that information, then we could use it for looking for trends. So that's regarding the fly tipping issue. Just turning it round to the HWRCs, as Matthew's just eloquently stated in his report, the tonnages are down at sites post the kind of COVID restrictions being lifted, and I think this may be down to various reasons. I think one of the biggest issues that I can see as a significant change is the need for vans and trailers to register at HWRCs, which we never had in the past before COVID. And that might be deterring trade waste and also out of county users coming to our household waste recycling centres. That's the only significant change that we can see at the moment from where it used to be with the original model. So we don't know. The simple fact is we don't know why these figures are down. It's going to be interesting to see over time whether they do increase back to a kind of pre-COVID level. But at the moment, there isn't a compelling argument for saying that we should be opening up the HWRCs longer because the tonnages are actually down. So all of the sites are now operating 5 days a week. Quite a few of the sites have more material than Boston that are quite healthily efficiently coping with the amount of throughput. Yes, we've had issues with residents queuing at some particular sites, for example, Spalding and Boston, once we lifted the restrictions in September. But now that things are kind of settling down and the seasonality on composting is kind of decreasing, I think things are settling down to a manageable status. So there isn't a compelling argument to say that we need to open up the HWRCs. And just to reiterate what Nicole said about the view of residents, I hear that a lot. But ultimately, it's about responsibility of the individual, and it comes back to behavioural change. And if someone, as Nicole has very eloquently just said, if someone is going to load their car and then realise they can't get into a facility, are they suddenly going to break the law and flight it? And yeah, it's not for me to make a judgment on that, but it just seems to take a dim view of residents to put two and two together and try and use one issue to create a change in a different part of the service, because I don't think that the two are necessarily connected. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. In terms of if Boston collect the fly tipping waste specifically on the truck and not the bulky waste collection, it might be worth just nipping to the transfer station and weighing it in future to get a better figure of what's going on. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Chairman. I think Nicole did say that she said as an officer not political, so I'll say something politically, and I agree. I don't think Councillor Evans probably meant it that way, but to suggest that somebody that can't get rid of their waste legitimately suddenly becomes a breaker of the law, I think is not what we want to say. We do know that fly tipping is caused by certain people, and occasionally, you used to see it years ago where people might leave stuff, but in general, people are more responsible now. But the real point I think we need to make is that the private sector who are listening in, they'll be clapping their hands with joy that if they think that as local authorities we see the answer is just to provide more services to make it easier and take away everybody else's responsibility, then that's not where we are. I mean, I'd like to remind members that have been on this partnership for a long time. We talked about the fact that we should really be called a waste reduction partnership, not a waste management. If you tell everybody there's a free service, when fantastically it's a well-used service, because of course they're going to do it. But if I buy a new fridge, it's my job to get rid of that fridge. If I buy a new sofa, it's my job. And also the people that are selling us this equipment and these goods, they've got a responsibility. It shouldn't be that if you've got something bulky you want to get rid of, then go to the council and they'll pay a fortune through your rates to take it away for the minority who can't be bothered to do it themselves. And there's always going to be some people that need a bulky waste service. That's why we have it. So that's not me saying entirely that's the situation. But of course, if you just make it very easy for people, they are going to use it instead of doing what they should be doing, which is taking responsibility. And of course, the easier we make it to get rid of waste, the more waste we generate. That's the animal. It's only by putting things in place to make people think more about the waste they generate that you actually end up generating less waste. That's the whole thing about what we're going forward with the green agenda, but in the districts, the county, the country, the nation. We've just had COP26. It's all linked. Waste is not separate to environmental issues. It is one of the biggest issues. And so I'm firmly against just opening up free services and saying that's the answer, because it isn't. All that does is generate more problems.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Evans, did you want to come back?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. I definitely don't take a dim view of my residents. That's why I am so vocal. And I feel that you may be... I wish we could have had the public here and then you would have had a greater understanding. I agree that people will not fly tip. Generally, they will not fly tip, but I have never had so many people say to me, when they're turned away from the tip with mattresses, they're turned away from the tip with rubble, which happens at Boston quite a bit. And we've had a meeting, a very successful meeting with all the councillors with HWRC, and that nothing's happened. So I'm going to ask Mike, please, can we have another meeting to find out what exactly happened since that one, because we're all a bit desperate here. People that have been turned away with the stuff that they've taken have said, I've had messages saying, I feel really bad, but I understand why some people fly tip. There's been a slight change in frustration and anger, I think. But I don't for 1 minute have a dim view of my residents, actually. Otherwise, I wouldn't be fighting left, right and centre to get the best for them. But I do think we have to recognise a bit more, because I do think people do think we're not listening, we're not helping them get rid of their waste. And I think we've just got, yes, on paper we're fine, but if we actually look at the data, for every district, it's measured differently. So we haven't actually got the facts. We need to have really clear facts. If you were to put some extra water in your bin lorry, it would say you've done extra tonnage. So we need clear facts so people can actually see what we're achieving. The majority of people do want to work towards climate change, but if you're going backwards and forwards to the tip over and over again, because you've been turned away and you've had to queue up, sitting in a long queue, you're not helping climate change. So I think we just need to be a bit more sort of clearer on right across the board, and hopefully it's moving in that direction. Make life easier for people, I think.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. To say the offer's open as well to use the transfer station for weighing the fly tipping material, and at least we've all got a clear indication of what is happening in Boston. Councillor Head.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you.
Yeah, just a couple of things. Obviously, there's no silver bullet for any of this. The interesting thing for me from what Matthew said earlier in terms of the household waste centres, that they're running at 60% capacity. Whilst we were in lockdown, there was a big complaint for people they couldn't book, couldn't get in, and that's why it was fly tipping. We've now got open season at the recycling centres. People can go as and when they want, and yet Boston appears to be having a really, really significant uplift. Looking at the figures there, it's 100% extra. I can't tell Boston what the problem is. It looks as if it would be an interesting project for someone to do an in-depth study as to why that's happening. What I do come back to a comment that was made earlier about education, the money that we spend on education. And I think what we have to realise, particularly with MDR collections, we're looking for a cultural change. We've allowed residents, or we've not engaged with residents to encourage them to recycle correctly the right materials in the right bin for a large number of years. And quite frankly, you're not going to solve that problem overnight. So there is a continual engagement session. And if people don't understand that the recycling centres are not open on a Wednesday and a Thursday, or whatever the times are, and they can't take certain materials, again, it's an engagement, it's an education thing. And I realise that rural districts have a different demographic, and the way that they operate are different to towns and boroughs. So we all need to look at this individually. But I do think that education plays a huge part in this, and engagement. And I don't know how Boston operates, but certainly there should be a lot more member engagement with their residents. That's the key to this. We need to get out there as members, talk to our residents, have surgeries. If there's a particular problem in a ward in Boston with fly tipping, then the members need to get off their bikes, get out with the residents, and get on with it. So that I think is the key to it. We all need to take responsibility of this, from members down to residents. You can't push it all onto the residents. You can't push it on to the council. We need to get out and do things and be proactive. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Head. Is there anyone else? Mike, is that a legacy hand or?
No, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to respond to a couple of points. The use of the weighbridges at the transfer stations is obviously it's available, and it will be useful to have that information if we could collect it. I think one of the bigger problems is that outside of Boston, potentially in the bigger districts, material it wouldn't be feasible to try and weigh material at transfer stations, because, for example, we've only got 5 transfer stations around the county, and a lot of the material is deposited at household waste sites, which are obviously a lot more spread out, and there are more of them. So I think it will be difficult to achieve that elsewhere. However, as an exercise, I think it would be useful if Boston could put all their flighted material through the transfer station and have it weighed. And it's something that it would be really useful just to kind of collect that data if they were willing and able to do that. And just to respond to Councillor Evans as comments on the kind of the issues at the HWRC where material has been rejected, that's been for several reasons, I think, but mainly down to the driver shortage with our haulage contractor, which has occurred in the last few months, whereby bins were not able to be serviced as frequently and emptied as much as we would have liked when there has been driver shortages by BIFA. So it's something that which hopefully we're over now, and we have a bit more resilience with the haulage contractor. But also, I think one of the issues which exacerbated that was the free bulky waste collection service which Boston introduced, and it created a lot of pressure which we previously didn't have experience of, and we've tried to address that by having more containers on the sites, and I believe this situation has alleviated now. We've got at its peak we had 4 containers for mattresses, which is to be blunt, is a unforeseen amount of containers for one type of material of that nature. Normally we would have 1 or 2 at the bigger sites, but we were having 4, and we were finding it difficult to actually empty those containers. And one thing to bear in mind is that the fleet of trucks that service the HWRCs, it's a finite fleet of 5 or 6 vehicles for the whole of the county, and so we do get a disproportionate focus in certain areas when we have this big increase of material. And ultimately we do have to reject certain materials if containers become full and we can't service them and have them removed as soon as we would like. It's regrettable, but what we've put in place is a system whereby we can notify the public a lot earlier when we do think that we will be facing difficulties, just to kind of prevent people loading their vehicles and needlessly coming to visit our site. So it's something that it's been a learning process for ourselves, but I think it does kind of it has been exacerbated by the kind of contractor issues that we've had and we've all been facing. I think that's something that we all need to be a bit sympathetic towards. So thank you.
Thank you, Mike. We've got Victoria, then we've got Adi after that.
Hi, yes, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think you're right, Mike. I think we have, haven't we all, felt the impact of COVID and driver shortages in all types of ways. But just to say that the increase in mattresses and the difficulties in getting rid of white goods in particular that have been either collected on bulky and fly tips isn't just Boston, it's both Skegness is having major problems, and so is South Holland. So I think it's not really so much to do with having a free bulky collection. I think this is more of a change in materials that are being deposited, but just interesting to see how 3 authorities are showing high increasing levels of mattresses coming in, whichever route they're coming in.
Thank you, Victoria. Adi?
Thanks, Chair. I think just to add to the conversation, if I can, it's really difficult to measure weight of fly tips. Lots of districts will collect it alongside street cleansing operations, etc. We all report through fly capture, though, on numbers, as far as I'm aware, and that's something that's nationally agreed. So that might be a better way of Boston measuring their comparisons. We, as others, have suffered a major hike in fly tips over the last year, which is now fortunately reducing, but it's a national trend for various reasons, as national commentators will portray. I've recently done a report for our members around bulky waste service, and we can find no evidence that charging for services results in fly tipping. Part of that report was presented to members a BBC report done in 2019, which was really in depth, and considered one council that did take the charge away for bulky waste, and they enjoyed no reduction in fly tipping. So I'd be interested to know whether Boston's recent free bulky waste service, whether they could stand down their fly tipping service or reduce the need for the fly tipping service. Perhaps some learning for us there. I suppose I would just finish by saying part of us as the partnership is to encourage reuse, and part of our charge for bulky waste is when residents come to us and perhaps challenge that charge, we're pointing this towards the charitable sector and the potential third user for our materials, which is really important for people who are not in the fortunate position that some of us are, who can afford to buy new. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, AD. Is there any more speakers? No, seeing no more speakers on this item. It's like a lot of this was just for noting, so can I just ask those that are virtual members, voting members, just to put your screen on, please, and raise your hand if you're... Yep, so that's been noted, thank you. So the next one is item 7 is the paper and card collection. David Steels.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think we've heard a lot about the twin stream recycling already. The report, the appendices of the report goes through some of the bigger issues for North Kesteven District Council that we've been dealing with over the past few months. So I don't intend to go through in any detail, but happy to take any questions on those. What I would suggest or recommend to the rest of the partnership, that there are opportunities that all partners can look towards dealing with right now. One of those is going back to the waste strategy. We've agreed a common recycling mix as part of the waste strategy. We've now got a very well developed right thing, right bin campaign and campaign materials associated with that. So I'd strongly encourage all members of the partnership to look towards getting that information out to local residents, even if the decision hasn't been taken yet with regards the separate collection of paper and cards. Some of the issues, I think, if members decide to do that, some of the issues I think need to be borne in mind. Some of the top contaminants that we've found in our bin are around what we call soft plastics. So that's things such as bin bags and carrier bags, as well as lids off materials. That's quite high on the agenda, if you like, of nationally looking towards tackling that. And fortunately, a lot of supermarkets are starting to do that ahead of what we're likely to see within the Environment Act once secondary legislation is issued. But Chairman, I would like to offer some thanks to the partnership, to members, North Kesteven District Council members across the board who unanimously decided to adopt the new policies and have supported the rollout of this project. To officers as well, officers throughout the partnership, my partners, senior strategic waste officers, in particular from my point of view, but sort of going down through the operational side of things, and officers within North Kesteven District Council across the board. This was truly, you know, an authority-wide project, and we've already had the discussion about the engagement and the education and the communications. Those in particular were very important, and very thankful for that. Rachel and the team in particular have certainly helped. And last but not least, the residents within North Kesteven as well, who, as the figures show in the final appendix, you know, notwithstanding the issues that I go through within the report, have certainly embraced the changes that we've made, but also the reinforcement of what those core materials should be within the NDR. So, next steps. Certainly, it's about maintaining those good figures, that the position that we're in at the moment. Certainly looking at what the Environment Act is likely to bring. The government are looking at that national core set of recycling materials and what those might be. And certainly welcome, it was mentioned earlier about working with partners. Councillor Evan mentioned about working with Boston. Certainly that was really, really successful as part of the trial. Really good working relationships with South Holland and Boston Borough Council to deliver the trial, which was certainly a big factor to get us where we were in terms of the decision and the next steps that way. And myself, Adi and Rachel had a meeting this morning. Next on the agenda is West Lindsey, and I think it's really important that we keep those lines of communication going to make sure that the next steps are as smooth as possible and everybody learns from what we've learned at North Kesteven. And yeah, thank you, Nicole, as well, for sort of exploring what those alternatives are. But Chairman, very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, David. Councillor Brearley.
Thank you, Chairman. I very much welcome the report and the information from North Kesteven District Council, and congratulate them on the successful rollout of this. I think one thing that we have very much in our favour as a waste partnership is that the vast majority of people absolutely want to do the right thing. And that's never been more important because we've all followed COP26 so closely, and especially in such a rural area as Lincolnshire, I think we understand better than most the importance of care for the environment. I completely take Councillor Head's point earlier that we have we've possibly been a little bit remiss for a variety of reasons in working with residents to ensure that the right material goes in the right bin. From a West Lindsey point of view, this is very much the time to reinforce that message. And I've been speaking with residents and local councils about the rollout of the purple lidded bin for such a long time now, without certainty of when we would get the rollout in West Lindsey. I am pleased it's going to be the next one. But most people's reaction is, that is great. When can we get started? There have been occasional questions raised about where individual householders will put the additional bin. But I'm sure that for most people, those things can be easily resolved. I think, yes, going back to what Mr. Steele said about the final appendix, Appendix 8, there is a huge piece of work to do. There's a long section in the report about communications, but again, going back to the points made earlier, that is not just communications from the council, but the role of members, I think, is crucial in this. But Appendix 8, the figures speak for themselves, and the additional bonus is the reduction in contamination, and therefore the increase in the value of the material, the dry recyclables, but not paper and card. So, Chairman, just as an aside, I've read the report carefully. It does refer to both Councillor Wright and Councillor Head going out on the rounds, which is absolutely the right thing to do. But I did skip over that in case there was an element of challenge in it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brearley. Councillor Head.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, Councillor O'Brien, it's definitely not a challenge. I found it actually very rewarding to get out and meet residents and see it firsthand. And it just reinforced that the majority of people do want to do the right thing. It was interesting that if you met the lady of the household as you were tagging the bin, it was always the husband or the other partner that was the problem. So that was an interesting thing that came out from being on the streets. But generally, residents were very proactive. We were well received. I know that in the early part of the week that I went out, things were a little bit fractious, and I think some of the crews had a rough ride. But what I really wanted to say was that in terms of this whole rollout of the twin stream, the partnership working, and I come back to we are a Lincolnshire Waste partnership. Boston may well have been unfortunate that they went in first at the deep end. And I would hope to see that as we move on, certainly at North Kesteven, we've learned an awful lot from Boston, and I thank them for what they've done in terms of that. And hopefully West Lindsey will learn from Boston and North Kesteven. I would like to say a big thanks to Rachel, the team, and the county, because the information that's gone out, the little graphics, the videos and things, they have been really well received. The interaction with schools, kids have been really interested and fired up with all of this. So that is a really, really key thing for me, the education part of it. And the biggest problem that I've seen out on the streets with people is this whole plethora of things that tell you that they can be recycled, when in actual fact we can't handle them. I suppose at the final analysis, yes, everything could be recycled. I had a resident that complained that why is it that Marks and Spencer's have an orange container that says it can be recycled, but we can't recycle? My reply was, you must take that up with Marks and Spencer's. There's a lot of greenwash from companies putting stuff out there which makes our lives very difficult. So the message that I have is the thing that you're going to counter when you get on the streets is people trying to do the right thing but not quite understanding what we can handle here in Lincolnshire. But I do thank the county and Rachel and her team and engagement. It's been quite, I think, from a North Kesteven perspective, quite a successful rollout of this, and I thank Boston for going first. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Councillor Head. I think it was quite. I come out on the second month's round, and it didn't seem as bad as what the press had reported on the previous month. So whether that was because everyone had learnt and everything else, I'm not sure. I will go to West Lindsey on the first round and go with them. But Rachel, did you want to come in?
Yes, thank you. There's just a couple of bits that I just wanted to pick up on from the various comments. So I think it's really important to say that in terms of this project, it was about behaviour change. It's the biggest change in the way that we have collected and disposed of waste in the county in over 20 years. So let's not underestimate that. But the figures, and trust me, I love a little bit of a spreadsheet, lots of data. The figures are showing us that the reduction in contamination across the mixed dry recycler has dropped and is sustaining at a lower level as well. We sample waste on a daily basis from across all of the districts now internally, as well as, and if I go back to Matthew's previous item, the challenge back with our contractors about their sample data. We've done an awful lot of work in particular over the last sort of 4 to 6 weeks on bringing that into line so that we have accurate data. But, you know, for example, in Boston, we started off with a 32% contaminant rate in our mixed dry recycling. That now is sustaining at just under 20%. Absolutely amazing. And I think it's also very important to point out that from a county point of view, so a partnership point of view, the contractor for the paper and card report that we consistently give them materials in excess of 98.5% quality and within their moisture target. They are quite happy to come out and say that Lincolnshire County Council provide them with the best quality material of all local authority clients, and that is very much down to that partnership approach. The other thing that David had mentioned around using the right thing, right bin, and addressing contamination. This is twin stream, and I know we started talking about paper and card, but I need to focus on the fact that the big problem to solve is to reduce contamination, improve the quality, whilst reducing waste, which again is from the strategy, the Joint Municipal Waste Management Strategy objectives. And the right thing, right bin, we've tested, we've used residents for testing, we've taken feedback. So our comms colleagues, our communications teams are working on, for all districts, irrespective now of how far down the programme of rolling out twin bins, I'm hoping within the next 4 weeks, there will be collateral specific to your authorities that you can start to use now. So anything you can do to get ahead of cleaning up that contamination before we do that focused work is really, really important. So those materials will all be ready for each of the districts going forward. And just to back up, that facilitation of sharing goes on at every level of this as we move across the county. So from a member conversation to strategic officers, to operational officers, to communications officers, to customer service, we are facilitating those conversations and setting them up, and we do continue to learn. It's really interesting to see that this isn't to lift it and drop it into the next authority, because each authority has its own demographics and its own challenges. But I think for me, it's clear to see we've got data that shows that since April, May, this is sustaining in terms of our quality, and that's the driver that we were looking for. We just need to keep getting it better now, don't we?
Thank you, Rachel. Councillor Wright.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to reiterate, I mean, because it's so important that partnership working, when you get it right, works really well, and that's what this has been. I mean, from the education side, everything's been put in there into the teams on the ground. You know, having found out that Rachel's middle name's now Kissinger, watching the diplomacy she deployed with some of the people, which I didn't realise prior to seeing her talk to the public, only to members previously, then it was well received on the streets, and the messaging. You know, it's so important, as Councillor Head said about members getting off the backside and getting involved. That's just setting the challenge there. I mean, that's the second time I've been out on the bins. The other time was for a full green route. So if you want to lug grass bins around all day, you appreciate what our people are going through doing the job. You know, it's important to get out there and see what's happening. But some of the things that cut across both the paper card and the MDR is when people are saying to you, as Councillor Ed said about the greenwashing bit, oh, but it's got this symbol on it, you know. So, for instance, pizza boxes have still got recyclable on them, and that's so disgraceful, because at the point that it was dry material, it was. As soon as they put the grease paper and the horrible cheesy pizza in it, then it stopped being at that point. And you can steal this line if you want, but when people said to me, well, I keep looking at all the symbols, and I said, don't read the small print, read the right print. It's the booklet. You know, if it's what the booklet says, don't stand there with your glasses on trying to see that little symbol that actually in writing underneath it says, in some areas is recyclable, depending on your recycling route, you know. We need to just get them away from that, and if people just make it so easy by reading that leaflet and just sticking it in, that's the answer. So teamwork between the authorities and how we do this, but then education all the time. And I just buff people away. I mean, some people have accused me of being a bit rude about it, but I've just said, I'm not even going to entertain it. If you're telling me you stood there in your kitchen for 15 minutes trying to work out where one piece of rubbish went, you should have put it in your black bin by now if it was just that one bit, because you couldn't work it out. So, you know, that's what we need to be saying to people. It's not about a massive, great effort. It's not about change. It's just about changing your ways. And it's so simple if you just adopt those practices. And it's, you know, we're proving it can be done. So, thank you.
Thank you. Nicole, did you want to come in?
Yeah, what I wanted to do is echo an awful lot of what has actually been said, but build upon it. But I do think it's as this partnership kind of matures and develops, and we then move to the next stage and the next challenge, because actually what's ahead of us is a lot harder than what we've achieved so far. I do think it's important for maybe us to pause and reflect on what we have achieved. I sit on regional and national groups for a whole host of different service areas, but I've never come across a waste partnership that has formed in this way, with a combination of the disposal authority and the collection authorities working collaboratively and collectively together. And I think we should remind ourselves of what we have achieved to be able to do this, which has manifested in the twin stream rollout, and will be further tested when we have to take on the agenda of food waste and dealing with that on a weekly basis. But because of the relationships we're formed, and because of the way in which we are able to negotiate and talk to each other, that for me bodes really, really well. I don't go to senior officer working groups as much as I would like anymore, but they are fairly rough and tumble and can be. And I think that's great. I think that we can have a frank exchange of views about that simply won't work for me in my district, or that simply won't work in my waste transfer station. But nonetheless, officers work really hard to negotiate their way through that. And so it's about recognising that we are going from strength to strength. We are in a really, really positive place in comparison to some of the other local authority areas that just simply don't have this way of working. If we continue to work collectively together to share those risks and also to share those opportunities, then things that are going to come to us through the Environment Bill, like waste, like weekly food waste, etc., I think it positions is in a really comfortable and easy place in order to be able to take on those challenges and transition, because I don't think we can hide away from the fact that what comes next is going to be an awful lot more challenging to us, not least because of the finances involved, the infrastructure that's going to be needed, but also the cooperation that's going to be required between these organisations.
Thank you, Nicole. So, seeing no one else, I would actually just like to thank Boston and North Kesteven for doing the purple bin trial. The rollout. It's not always easy being the first in the line of fire, but I think you've both done really well. So I think this one's just for sort of noting again. So, is there any need to really ask for me? Nah. We'll go on to item 8, which is HGV drivers by, I think, Gary Smith's leading on this one.
Afternoon, members. I'm sorry, I was waiting for my microphone to come online. I simply put it down as a suggestion, as a verbal item for us all. In actual fact, it's come up in the meeting already, both in terms of the action notes from the last meeting and in the district and other partner updates at the beginning of the session. We know that it's an ongoing issue within South Kesteven District Council. We actually haven't yet had any major departures of HGV drivers, which is obviously a fear. Recruitment of HGV drivers has been difficult for a while now, and it's obviously with the national picture, that's increasingly hard. We've always taken the approach, and I know a number of other partners have, with their in-house provision, to have a grow your own approach, where we offer development opportunities for instance, loaders and others to secure their HGV license and proper accreditations, so they can take that on. That's something that we're continuing, as well as looking at other business continuity options, so that we can continue our waste collection services without disruption, despite the pressures. I simply was keen to hear the experience from others in terms of any steps or measures they may be taking, including reviewing of the pay for drivers and any other factors. As I say, I recognise, however, that we have actually already touched on this in previous parts of the meeting, so may not be much further to add from others, but that was all I was going to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. We've got Charlotte who wants to come in.
Yes, thank you. Some of you may be aware that we recently did put a proposal forward to council, and are just at the end of a consultation process to address a number of issues, but one of them being the driver shortage. It is a restricted document, but I'd be happy to have any discussions with anybody offline if they wanted to talk to us about it.
Thank you, Charlotte. David?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, through you. From Gary's question about what others are doing, I would suggest North Kesteven are probably doing very similar to what South Kesteven are doing. He talked about growing our own, about recruitment difficulties, so trying to get the message out. we had some recruitment videos that we put out there that got quite a good response through social media. But it's also managing in-house teams as well, making sure that we try and retain them as best as possible through working conditions. We went through a pay review, it's probably 2 years ago now, throughout the whole of the authority. So it's set at a level for drivers that should be reasonable for the work that we're doing. But I think the other thing that we've got as an advantage in terms of driving for waste collection services, certainly on the collection side of things, compared to other forms of driving, it's a more regular kind of approach, and so that's the thing that we've sold. That there's no late hours or not substantially great amount of overtime. Working with a team, the importance of being a team leader for the part of the crew, and that's the bit that we've sold it on. What I would suggest taking forward, I know that there's an officer working group that looks at transport and issues such as that. I think there is an action to probably for that group to carry on the good work that they're doing by sharing that good experience, that good practice and the experiences that they've had so far, and like we did during COVID, to look at making sure that we support each other as best as possible for any issues that crop up in terms of that advice and good practice and such like.
Thank you, David. Councillor Brearley.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. This really refers back to item 4 of the agenda, which was the updates from the partners. Clearly, we are about to move into our new central depot, which the official opening is next Friday. And all the time that I've been a member, it's been an ambition throughout the council to provide facilities befitting the work that the teams carry out on our behalf. The old depot was, well, frankly, not fit for purpose. If somebody was visiting the district, you wouldn't take them to the old depot. Can I just express it that way? I think because people in operational services are by nature working throughout the district, it's very difficult to have direct contact with them as members that we would have with people in other services. But I do make a point, and I know other members do, that when we get compliments from members of the public about the service that the teams provide, I think it's really important to pass those back religiously. But it and always has been a very, very highly regarded service. And I think that counts for a lot. You'll notice that I'm studiously avoiding any mention of remuneration because remuneration is clearly very important. But I think, and I've been fortunate throughout my working life that I've always really enjoyed what I've done, and often that is more important than the financial side. So I hope those thoughts are helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Brearley. Gary Smith. Oh.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman.
Oh, Adi will come back after you, sorry.
Oh, please go ahead, Adi.
Thanks, Gary. I think it's fair to say we've done similar to others and we've lost a couple of drivers, but we've got advantages like David Steele says around the working hours and family friendly, etc. One thing I did think about, we're all paying we all have a grow your own policy, I think, as far as we know, and we're all paying quite a lot of money to get people through their tests, and when they get through the tests, you don't get an oven-ready waste driver, you get somebody who's really, really inexperienced, who's going to spend a lot of their time undertaking really complicated manoeuvres kids on school holidays, reversing all day long, and etc. Perhaps it's an idea to commission the officer working group to look at perhaps a trainer, which we could all jointly use, or get people through the tests and then bring them up to a certain skill level. We're all doing the same thing. We all have this, so perhaps an opportunity for one of our more experienced drivers, rather than us all paying for that service. Thanks.
Gary?
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to come back to say really appreciate those comments, and I think that actually was really helpful. I think in particular the idea from AD is a one worthy of further exploration, as what David said, and because I think there's a job for us all collectively to do, which I know we're all doing in our own organisations, about selling and articulating better the benefits of the driving roles within the council, which are very different to some of the headlines you get about HGV drivers and the style of tramping and being away from home and all of that sort of thing. Very different nature, as we know here, let alone the local government pension and other benefits that accrue as well. So really helpful, really appreciate comments from colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Last one, Councillor Wright.
If I could, Chairman, just rather than that just be a suggestion, that actually, could I suggest that all the members that are on the call actually take that back to the authorities for that to be investigated, because obviously that sounds like a lot of common sense to put something in place that actually works across all the authorities, might actually save us some money, but actually produce a product at the end of it. If I dare call a driver a product, I don't mean it in that route, but I mean the fact is that we end up with what we're looking for, which is trained refuse drivers rather than people who've got a licence. And if we've got a route to that, then that needs to be investigated rather than it just be, when I say suggested, I wouldn't want it to wither on the vine because we've not put an action in place.
Thank you. I think everyone's noted that. Yeah, so thank you, Gary. That takes on to item 9, which is the joint municipal waste strategy. Rachel.
Thank you. So in terms of this, in previous meetings, we've had a written presentation or paper. I think what's testament to say is, and it builds on what Nicole says, which I promise wasn't planned or scripted, but in terms of working together, a number of the key activities and elements we've already discussed through this meeting this morning, which is really heartening because it actually proves that we are doing the things that we say we're going to do in the action plan. So in terms of the areas of the action plan, the operational improvements and projects, we've talked long and hard about the twin stream and its merits and improvement, and that forms a significant number of the projects within that element of the action plan, and we've heard the progress on them. Just one update in terms of the consistency. We have a core mix, doing a regular review on the A to Z. There have been some updates that have come in the last month or so, suggested by some of our partners on the A to Z from residents, from listening to residents. So that will be updated and circulated within the next month for all websites, again, to maintain that consistency and partnership working. In terms of communications, engagement and education, just in terms of the work that has been done, there's a lot of work goes on behind the scenes, that's the word I'm looking for, isn't it? Scenes, with the partners communication officers. So there was a joined up National Recycling Week campaign went out. There's been comms that partners are producing around Halloween, about disposal of pumpkins, about fireworks safely. And what's excellent to see is the partners now taking it almost in terms that one partner produces the collateral for others. So you will see consistent communications going out on all social media now across the county. Fair to say Becky Allen, who was the county lead for us, has since moved on, and we've now got Chris O'Rourke as our lead, and Chris has joined us today. So that's bringing a nice new fresh set of eyes as well into the comms team. So going forward, I've mentioned and David spoke about the Right Thing, Right Bin campaign, and I think again being consistent in our messaging and closing down the whole I don't do it in this district but you do it in that district, so that is be moving forward again for the new year. The Christmas campaign will be county-wide and is being worked on along with some individual ideas that have been brought up around real nappies, and again working to that waste minimisation agenda, so with the keen eye on that in all aspects. In terms of education, and I know we've spoken about this, Councillor McNally, looking at education now, not only whilst we're rolling into Twinstream, but the performance and improvement team are building a schools programme which they're testing at the moment and continuing to build. That'll be offered out as materials and collateral to all schools across the county. We're making much use of videos for messaging and using school children, and then working with them in their individual primary schools to heighten their awareness, and to be honest, to learn from them at the moment and build that into the campaign. So that's moving forward. We'll have collateral for each school to do lessons and assemblies. We'll be pulling competitions so that we try and get some ideas out of the schools as well. So that's moving forward. In terms of assets and infrastructure, just to update that the replacement for Kirkby-on-Bay and HWRC, so in Tatchell, is moving forward, and that should be open and replaced in spring, there or thereabouts of next year. We've talked about the Environment Bill and the need to understand the immediacy of what's going to be required of us as a partnership around delivery of food waste collections. So there's been conversations and workshops across all the partnership to start looking at that and the impacts in terms of the waste transfer station, so those assets and what that needs to do. It's an integral part for delivery of the materials from the districts and disposal from us as county. And obviously in respect of that as well, looking at the options for anaerobic digestion. So that sits within there and is progressing. And governance, Matthew was ably taken us through the 2 key items on the action plan. So the updated performance indicators and the annual report. So it feels like there's not a lot, if you like, that I can add to, because we've discussed it in the majority of every other item on the agenda, which is really heartening to see.
Thank you, Rachel. I don't think anyone's... No one's got anything to say. So that's that one. Item 9, no, item 10. Is it? Yeah, item 10 is the Waste Partnership meeting dates for 2022. I'll just ask if anyone's got any objections rather than... No, so they're all approved. And the last one is the Waste Partnership Forward Plan. Now, is there anything that anyone would like to put on the plan? Whether that's what whether anyone wants to put the food waste transfer stations and stuff on the agenda. David?
Yeah, I think it will probably be a wider discussion about the Environment Act in general, because there's an awful lot of waste stuff as well as food waste within that.
Cole?
Yeah, I was just going to echo that. I know that the officers group have been working hard collectively about beginning to map out what that could look like, and I think that the sooner that we have that as a collective discussion, the better, really.
Yeah, well, go on, Councillor.
I was just suggesting to the chair, because obviously, even though we know that, well, we don't know, but we're guessing from what it says in the bill about the extension, the 2-year extension to the food rollout from 23 to 25. That's still only around the corner, isn't it? So rather than wait for, should we say, final polished reports, that we should be seeing it at least by March. You know, no later than March, because we've got an awful lot we're going to have to sort out. So whatever stage we're at in the partnership with looking at the bill, we need to be discussing it then, because it needs to be forming discussion, not ending discussion.
All agreed? Anyone else? No, that's it. So that's it. Thank you all for attending. Thank you for those that attended online. I don't know what the next... Oh. Yeah, March 22. Oh, Mike?
Yeah, sorry, Chairman. It's just one thing I wanted to put out there, just make an offer for the members of the partnership to visit our disposal facilities we've been in very good discussions with the a particular anaerobic digestion provider in county, who have made the offer to extend meetings and just events at the facility for people to raise their awareness. And it's something that we've recently had meetings at Palm and with Mid UK, looking at mixed dry recyclables, and it just feels like it will be a good opportune moment just to enable all the partners just to see what happens to our material, whether it be residual waste at the energy from waste plant, mixed dry recyclables, paper and card, which goes down to Palm, and also an AD proposal. So if people have the appetite for it, then it's something that we could arrange visits to different disposal sites, obviously time permitting, but that's just something I wanted to offer up, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I think if you could email everyone out of proposed dates or locations, whether it's Mid UK, Palm, or the AD plant at Hemswell, I think at least it can go out to all members, you know, not necessarily on the waste partnership, but to all members of the authorities.
Yes, will do. Thanks.
Thank you. So that's it. Meeting's closed, and thank you for coming.